All right, guys, episode number 63 of the Daru Strong Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Daru. Today we have my coach and also Nick Bear's coach, if you guys know who that is, Natasha Van Der Merwe. She is from South Africa, but now resides in Austin, Texas, has done 30 Ironman events, and also is a very accomplished coach of her own right, and also is honestly one of the most strategic coaches that I've been able to work with. She's been helping me along with my triathlon training. So we go over all that, her background, and also some triathlon training tips that you can utilize to increase your performance. But before we do that, I have to shout out the sponsors. VIVOBAREFOOT, go to VIVOBAREFOOT.com. That's the minimalistic shoe that I've been rocking in all my YouTube videos. I've been using it to help with full foot functionality, strengthening up the intrinsic muscles of the feet to allow me to be able to be strong and help with power production and also strength throughout my movements. And again, it just gets you stronger overall and makes you more functional as a human being. So make sure you check it out, VIVOBAREFOOT.com. Use the discount code DARUSTRONG at your checkout to get 10% off. All right. Also, if you want to rock some of the merch, I have the new apparel line out, Daru Strong Apparel. We have the blue, red, and black. You have the baseball, Daru Strong, leveling up since '88. You also have the Type A, which everybody is liking, so Type A shirts. And then also the original with the brackets, Daru Strong. You can check it out online, DaruStrong.com. Make sure you rock it. Make sure you support. Then also, what else we got? Mentorship program. If you are a coach looking to learn some of the methods, the protocols, the systems that I've been using for my athletes along with myself, you can check out my mentorship program. It's a one-time fee. You'll get access for life, and you'll get a bi-weekly call, which we are actually hopping on a call today to go over any questions that you have when it comes down to training and your own training. So make sure you hop on that. Go to DaruStrong.com, and you can get more details there. Now, let's get on to the episode.
Let's go. Mind over matter. Put your mind somewhere else and keep going. That little voice in your head is trying to stop you from getting to where you want to be. Be successful and keep moving forward. With your host and world-renowned strength and conditioning coach, Phil Daru.
Natasha, everybody has been asking me to get you on the podcast, and for those of them who do not know, let's go over like a background, how you got started in triathlon and Ironman, and how you started training me, and then the man Nick Bear too as well, because everybody's, I guess, knows you from that too as well. Right. So go ahead and go over your bio per se.
Yeah, so my bio and background is that I was a tennis player before this. However, as a kid, I grew up playing every single sport growing up in South Africa. So just for a background on triathlon, I did swim as a child, I ran as a child, and so that was easy to fall into. And I feel like all the strength training that I did for tennis helped me with the bike. Yeah. So going back to how I started triathlon, I was coaching tennis at the time here in Austin, Texas, and a friend just loved the sport and said, you have to do it. And went as far as actually to sign me up because I was so scared about doing it in this new challenge. And then I got hooked. Like, they taught me how to ride a bike. I got back in the pool and swam. I did my first race at 27 years old, and I ended up winning it.
Oh, nice.
And even at the time, I was like, it was fun. It was this amazing challenge, but it wasn't like, oh, this is like, now I got to do this. My husband, I met him at, my now husband, I met him at about the same time. He was also doing triathlon at the time, and he saw me doing it and was like, wow, you're doing really well. He said, you know, you need to look at maybe hiring a coach, you know, seeing what you can do with it. And at the time, I was coaching about 50 hours of tennis a week, and it was just wearing on my body. I mean, your body just breaks down. And then also in the Texas heat, it was 100 degrees, like 30 days straight that summer. And I was like, I need to get off the court and figure out something else. And so I essentially turned my passion of learning how to play tennis, coaching other people into, okay, how can I do this with triathlon as well? And so I joined, there was a local club that I could join, and so just learning from people in person, training with other people. I joined and started training with them, and then at that same time they were starting like this core program, and they needed some help with cycling classes. And with my background in coaching tennis, it was, they were like, yeah, come help us, and then I already had such early success in the sport. So I started to pull away from coaching tennis and just started doing some private lessons, maybe coaching 20 hours a week. And then I was helping this triathlon team in Austin, and then starting to train more myself.
Yeah. So what was the first triathlon that you do? What distance?
It was a sprint triathlon.
Oh, sprint one?
Yeah,
Okay.
where most people should start.
Yeah.
Which is, well, you're doing an Olympic. I mean,
Yeah,
you
it's
see
not
some
bad.
crazy
It's
people
not bad.
starting with an
Ironman, yeah. I wonder who that was.
Yeah, right. So that's not normal. I mean, figuring out how to train for 3 sports alone and fit it in your schedule and do really well at them, the best way to start is with a sprint. So it's like that distance is around a 500 to 700 meter swim. You know, you're looking at a 12 to 16 mile bike, depending. It's funny, it's not like strict distances, but it's in the ranges.
Okay.
And then you typically run 5K off, and that's a great starting point.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about like the differences between how to get prepared for those. But it's funny because I had Nick Bear on the podcast, and I asked him, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this, man. Who should I get to coach me? He's like, honestly, I'd refer you to Natasha all day long. And so I've known you through his videos, and I'm pretty sure everybody now has because he has a big following. So what happened when you met him? How did that all come about?
So the backstory, he was actually a friend of mine and now a coach of mine, said, hey, you got to follow this Nick Bear guy. And so I just followed him on Instagram. And then at the same time, that coach reached out to Nick, and so did 1 or 2 other people at the time that knew about me, because I was one of the only professional triathletes in Austin. And they said, oh, you should follow Natasha. And so we both basically followed each other through social media at the same time. And I was following, at that time, he'd already done Ironman Florida, and then he was starting to train for a marathon. And he was posting on social media about how he was doing his different run workouts. And I decided to give him some feedback on something that I saw. And at the time, he was like, who is this person? He didn't have some good thoughts to think about me, but he kept following me and seeing what I was doing with my own training at the time, because I was still racing professional, and then coaching other athletes and the success I was having. And then he kept on saying that he kept on getting messages to say, reach out to Natasha. If you want to learn heart rate training, reach out to her. And so it really just came about one day, like he wanted to do an Ironman. He knew I was close by because they were going to film the entire series. That was an important part, you know, if you're wanting to educate your audience, to have a coach in person to learn from, to be there available for filming. That's essentially how he picked me, and so he just reached out to me through social media. I was super excited but nervous. I think I explained to you, like, and I tell him all the time, our first meeting, my knees couldn't stop shaking under the desk. That's funny. And luckily, like, through the exposure of like being on cameras, because this is still pretty new to me. I mean, we're 7 months into this new way of life, I'd say. I'm now more comfortable, but back then, the only way I knew I was going to be comfortable being on camera was I had to over prepare. So everything I was going to teach him that day, like I was spending 3-4 hours of preparation of like, how can I say this the best way possible, not only for him but for his audience, so they could understand it.
That's funny.
And that got me comfortable with it. So.
Well, I mean, you definitely are a diligent coach, and I can attest to that because we've been working together for how long now? A few months, right?
Couple months.
Yeah. I mean, for that though, my level of training from a technical side has definitely gone up tremendously. Like, I didn't know how to swim. We talk about this all the time. Like, I knew how to not drown. I knew how to not die, basically. But I would sink. And we just did a workout today. It wasn't really a workout, but it was more like a technical session. And I could just feel myself getting better just from that. So the level of coaching, it takes a certain type of individual to coach somebody, to get them to where they need to be, but feel comfortable with the progressions that they're making. And you do that very well. You communicate well, you're on point all the time, and you get the one thing that I hate is when coaches don't give out the training program or lay it out and don't effectively communicate that training program. So you do that very well, which all you coaches out there, make sure that you do that. Now, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit because you said you coached tennis. Now, how is that different? And how does that differentiate? I know this, because obviously the sports are different, but coaching a tennis athlete as opposed to triathlete, how's that different?
The programming is different. So look, when you're coaching tennis, and the way I was doing it was more about that technique feedback and like the strategy on the court. But obviously, I mean, it's really not because it's like swim, bike, and run. It's also technique and in strategy. You know, I tell my coaches all the time, it's like you have to effectively be able to communicate. It's like there's one thing to know but if you can communicate one principle to someone and say it in 3 or 4 different ways, because something I learned from tennis was I would tell a kid, for example, to get their elbow up before they serve, and that did not resonate with them. And then another coach came in and said the exact same thing, but said it just slightly differently, and that resonated for that person to make that change.
Yeah.
And so like I carry that into what I'm doing today. And then I really, you know, we have the slogan on our website. It's like an athlete-driven approach, in that we have to understand and get to know the athlete as far as what makes them tick. How can you effectively communicate with them to make sure they're bought in, they're driven to do their workouts, they're understanding their workouts. So just very high on education. Make sure you know what you're doing and why. And then it's about managing relationship. It's like, it's really the technical aspect is not as important as much as like the relationship and understanding what does that person need.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's honestly one thing that a lot of the new coaches miss. They're good at understanding the technique, they're good at understanding the physiology, the biomechanics of the sport, whatever they're coaching, but they have no communication skills, they have no personality. And so for that, it's going to take you a long way. Now, getting back into the triathlon training, right? So you have the sprint, the Olympic distance, and then you have the big ones, the half Ironman, the Ironman, right? And then you have the ultras and all that other crazy stuff, which I'll be getting into soon once I'm level up, right? So let's go from sprint to Olympic distance. I know they're different. How do you train them differently?
Sprint and Olympic distance is very similar in that the intensity is pretty similar.
Because it's condensed.
Yeah, it's condensed, it's short. The sprint, you pretty much get to a level where you're training the race distance, or the time that it's going to take you to do a sprint is an hour to an hour 20 minutes. Okay. And so you look at what intensity do I need to take into that amount of time? And so if you're only swimming for 10 minutes, you're biking for 30 minutes, it's essentially an all-out effort. Yeah. And so you have to train yourself to be prepared for that kind of intensity. And so the training approach for those distances, obviously triathlon it's a very aerobic, I mean, it's all aerobic sport, but it's still the demands and the intensity level is just very different for the shorter distance versus the longer distance, where it's all about just that stamina, that strength to basically not slow down, to hold a certain pace over a longer time.
Gotcha.
And so just the intensity that's taken into your training differs. And then also an Olympic distance, the way it's scaled, the swimming is of high importance, because if you take into the amount of time that it's going to take you to do the race, the swimming actually takes more time compared to the bike and run versus a half Ironman and an Ironman, if that makes sense. Whereas in a half Ironman, you have time. You're going to be out on the bike for 5 hours, you're going to be running for 3 hours. You have 8 hours to make up for basically an hour swim. Gotcha. Whereas it's scaled differently for the Olympic and the Ironmans.
Do you think that as, like, let's say for instance, a power athlete, you know, for that, I know obviously it'd be better for them to hit a sprint triathlon, but it seems like they're damned if they do regardless, right? They got to do, it's going to be hard. It's enduring. Yeah. But you would start them off on a sprint and then move them away. Now, can they go from like a sprint to an Ironman, or is that just a big jump?
That's a big jump. Yeah. Just because, as you know already, it's like you're learning to train for 3 different sports, and then finding the time to do that, because what scales in your training is really that duration, the volume that you're putting into your sessions. And so the good news about a sprint is you're training for a 30-minute bike ride. So it's like we always overtrain really, because it impacts the run. So you're at most, if you train your bike for an hour, you're well prepared now for a 30-minute bike ride. You run, you've got to prepare for a 5K run. Overload, yeah. And so it's just a lot easier to train for that, just because the volume requirements are not as high. But then as you're getting into an Ironman, like learning how to go ride your bike for 5 hours, learning how to go run for 3 hours, you have to have all systems in place to be able to do that week in, week out. And
it's crazy.
Nutrition, recovery,
we'll talk about that
matters.
So, so like, the biggest thing that I've realized is nutrition, right? And I suck at it right now, because I'm used to, in a lot of ways, plus I'm coaching and I'm doing a lot of stuff. So, but the fueling is way different, because you have to actually eat and consume stuff while you're training, like in the middle of it. I'm not used to that, right? I barely drank any water when I fought, like, because, you know, for me, it's just like, all right, we got the round, maybe in between rounds, but that was it. It wasn't like I could take a sip of water while I'm throwing punches. So for that, let's talk a little bit about nutrition and how it is highly, highly beneficial for an individual to do so, and go by like the steps. I know we've done it in the video. Plus, make sure you guys watch out for the YouTube video, because she did a whole YouTube video on it. Actually, a 3-part series. So that's coming out on my other channel, so make sure you check it out. But can you just go over like basic nutrition guidelines when, let's say, for instance, let's say for me, right? You have the Olympic triathlon, so let's go for that.
Okay, first I want to say something first.
Okay.
The reason we need to fuel so much is because of the sheer volume of training that we do, the cumulative training. So a lot of people, nearly every single one of my athletes, they do doubles. They're doing a bike ride in the morning, or a bike and a run off in the morning, and then they're doing a swim in the afternoon. If they are under fueling for that workout in the mornings for their training, it's drastically going to affect their energy levels for later in the day. And so it's really about staying on top of energy in, energy out, and making sure they have energy to do this essentially day in, day out, because it affects performance, recovery, adaptation, everything. Okay, and then you have to, because of the distance that we're training and racing, you have to fuel throughout, because you're essentially going to otherwise run out of fuel. You know, especially in Ironman, that's the limiter for most people, is they run out of fuel and energy and they slow down. So the breakdown that we've found that works for everyone is just simply, we know we need to drink, we know we need to take in sodium because we're losing that through our sweat, and then we know we need carbohydrates, which is our main source of fuel. And so if we break that down, okay, how much do we need to drink? And the answer for that is different for everyone, and we figure that out through a sweat test. And so we have all athletes create charts where they'll weigh themselves before workout, they'll do the workout, they'll make note of how much they drank during the workout, and then they'll weigh themselves after. And for every pound they lost, that's 16 ounces, and then they'll add in what they drank. And so they know for those conditions, so they'll write down it was 70 degrees, it was 55% humidity. For these conditions, this is how much I need to drink. And then the goal is we want to replace what you can handle is around 75% of replacing that amount that you lost. Okay. So, and then we have them do it at different humidity temperatures, so that when they come to a race, and for that day it's 90 degrees, because a lot of these races in the summer, it's 90 to 100 degrees when we're doing these races.
For sure,
So you have to be on top of hydration. And so we... so the how much you need to drink, that's how we figure it out. They understand what they have to do at different temperatures. Sodium, the only way you can figure out how much sodium you're losing is if you get into a lab. And so thankfully there are a number of companies out there. We use one that's called Levelin, and they send you a sweat patch in the mail, and you essentially put this patch, and you saw it in Nick Bear's videos, you put a patch on your arm, you did an hour workout, and then after that, we put that patch into a small little vial. We sent it off to the lab, and they tested basically how much sodium was in that patch.
Gotcha.
And then it scales. So like we know for how much he lost, because we have to track how much he lost weight-wise. And so for that amount of ounces of weight lost, he knows he needs to replace 1,400 milligrams of sodium. If that number goes up, then that number may go to 1,800 milligrams of sodium. And that's what you have to replace every single hour.
Gotcha. So is that differs between each individual event, right? So for the swim, bike, and run?
It does. So there's no way to test for the swim, but we do test for the bike and we do test for the run. We do find that it does differ, and so we have athletes do testing on the bike and on the run to see what the difference is. And for the most part, if the athlete can make sure to replace, because the bike is the longest distance for the event, if you can replace the sodium that is needed to be replaced on the bike, it typically sets you up for a good run, that if you can just kind of do it by feel after that. So depending on how heavy of a sweater you are, I would say what's shocking for most people is every test that comes back, we're seeing a spread from 1,000 milligrams per hour to the highest I've seen is 2,800 milligrams per hour that someone is having to replace.
Really?
And that's just way lower than what people are doing out there.
Yeah, of course.
And you understand, obviously, the effects. I mean, the most common is people find themselves cramping, even though that's not the only reason someone cramps. That's one of the reasons someone cramps. But
definitely. Just fatigue in general.
Just fatigue, blood plasma drops, etc. So that covers sodium. And then carbohydrates, that has vastly changed in science over the years. So in the past, there was like for every kilogram you weigh, that's how much carbohydrates you need to take. And then it was 60 grams, that's all you can take. And truthfully so, they're saying 60 grams is all you can transport from one carbohydrate source. So we're limited at 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. Your gut cannot absorb any more.
Yeah.
Then they found that if you take energy from 2 different sugar sources, so you do 60 grams of glucose, 30 grams of fructose, which is the most common scale, and you'll see tons of products out there that have like a glucose fructose mix that is 2 to 1. If you can do that, you can actually scale up to 90, and then there's some pros out there that are pushing up to 100. I know there's 1 or 2 that are doing 100 to 120.
Is there like a cutoff point? You know what I mean? Like, is it too much could be detrimental?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that you have to figure out for yourself.
Because I could see, gastrointestinal problems and things like that.
Absolutely. And you have to also adjust for the temperature. Because like if you're trying to get blood flow to your skin to cool you for sweating when it's 90, 100 degrees, you can't fuel as much, because every time you're fueling, now you're getting blood flow to the gut. It's taking away from it. Yeah. So you have to change your nutrition plan based on how hard you're going, what the temperature is, and then you have to know what can I tolerate. And a lot of it, we talk about gut training all the time. Like it's super weird taking in that many calories and like getting the gut trained to take that in. So we have all our athletes do all their long workouts with what they want to fuel with on race day. Because it's such a big thing that can affect your performance that we have to have it nailed down.
So what are some of the sources of fructose and glucose that you use?
So a big one, we always start with what's on the course. And so Gatorade Endurance is what's on course, and the beauty of that is you don't now have to carry, so for an Ironman, you're out there for 5-6 hours. Let's just say you have to replace 48 ounces of water or liquid per hour. You need 1,200 milligrams of sodium. That's in the bottles. So if you're just drinking 2 bottles of Gatorade Endurance every single hour.
Gatorade Endurance?
Gatorade Endurance. It's a different
type of Gatorade.
It is, yeah. And it's endurance formula, tons more sodium.
Okay.
For every single bottle, you're getting 600 milligrams of sodium.
And how big is the bottles?
It's a 20 ounce, 24 ounces.
Okay, yeah, the bigger ones, like the medium-sized, bigger ones. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're going through an aid station. You're probably going to hit an aid station out on the course where they're giving you handoffs every 30 minutes. And so for you to just be able to grab a bottle, put that in your front hydration system, and then just drink that, you're staying on top of all those needs. The liquid. However, people get in trouble when now you're trying to take in that amount of carbohydrates, but how much you need to drink doesn't match up with what the carbohydrates are in that bottle. So you have a ton of companies that will say you got to separate it. Your bottles have to have your water and sodium needs because per those conditions, but then how much carbohydrates you need, that needs to come from a different source, and that is someone who has GI issues, because if you have to scale your carbohydrate source, you don't want it to be in the same bottle that now is meeting your hydration and sodium needs.
Gotcha.
The only way to
too much
figure
overload on everything.
Yeah. So it's like learning what are the sources, where am I getting, as you said, like the gels. There's Goo, there's Cliff. But again, what is on course so that I can just take what's there versus have to carry everything. And then you have like a slow release carbohydrate versus a very sugar-filled carbohydrate. So like Nick Bare's product, which is cluster dextrin for the sugar source, there's no sugar in it. And so that is more termed of like a small steady energy. You know, you can probably fuel on less. A lot of people like to use that as their base fueling and then supplement with maybe
like a
sugar
or something like that.
Just to give them that pick me up and meet those carb needs.
So you're obviously carrying that with you too as well, and they have it on course. So when you when I go to get ready for my competition, I'm going to be bringing Goo and other sources, and I'm put it in the bag of the transition bag, right? And I'll put it on the bike, and then as you're going, because you said basically you're taking in a lot of your fuel and your nutrition on the bike because it's easier to do, right? Right.
So for your race, which is an Olympic distance race, there are no aid stations. What I was referring to
Awesome. Fucking awesome. Just, all right.
So for the run there is, but not on the bike. So 70.3 in Ironman, there are aid stations. Anything shorter, there are not. So you have to take all your fuel with you. So you have to know exactly how long is it going to take me out. Is it going to be 45 minutes? What is my intensity and what can I tolerate at that higher heart rate? And so a lot of the times for a sprint, you might be taking like one gel with you. Something easy access when you're working really hard. You can't chew, you're not taking any bars.
Yeah.
So like a gel, and then you fill in your water bottle, one water bottle on your bike with electrolytes. And that's all you need for the sprint.
Sure.
Maybe a gel on the run, depending on how long you're going to be out there. And then on the run, there'll be aid stations, typically just water, maybe some electrolyte drink, nothing much after that.
Okay.
The Olympic, you have to see what that course has, because some of them have a different fuel source, like a different sponsor. So a lot of, and that's great, because what people see is like, okay, UCAN is at this race, so I'm going to have to get UCAN to practice with it. I want to like refer to that as fueling, otherwise I have to take what I need. For an Olympic distance, you're going to need probably, based on your sweat loss, 2 bottles, so a front hydration system, so it's just right in front of your face and making you drink, and then a bottle on the frame. In both of them, you can either put all your calories and your sodium, or you can have it just electrolytes and then take 1 or 2 gels for the distance you're going to be out there.
Okay.
You'll probably be an hour, so 2 gels is fine. Someone slower, 3 gels.
Yeah, because the distance that I have is 24 miles on a bike, 1,500 meters swim, and then I have a 6.1 mile run, which I believe would take me about an hour and change, right? Less than that? Yeah. On the run though?
Yeah. Because that's a 10-minute mile.
That's right. That's right. Very true. Even I'm just thinking off the bike and stuff like that. But I would like to be. What's a overall for the Olympic? How long should it last?
So the pros are going 150 to 2 hours.
Gotcha.
Okay. Pro women are 2 to 210. The average age group time is between amateur time. Call them age group. 230 to 330. I mean, there's so many levels scaled, right?
I'm aiming for 145 because I'm a high achiever, right?
Right. But honestly, we train you so well on the swim and bike, and that's why we say, like, if you want to run well, you can't just run train and expect to. No, the swim is going to affect the bike. It's going to affect the run. So that we train the bike so hard so that when you come up off the bike, even though you've ridden really hard, you're so fit that you can still run well. It almost feels like it's a warm-up once you get going. And a lot of people feel like they run better off the bike.
I do.
Than on their own.
Yeah, well, because I was telling you, like, because of the ACL, like, I feel like my knee warms up because of the bike, and then when I hop off the bike, I feel a little bit more springy. You know, I have more a higher cadence. I'm able to like float. As opposed to just going out and running, I feel like it takes me at least 15 minutes to really warm up, and then I can kind of coast off after that. But I feel like, you know, and you tell me differently, but the bike is going to be my strongest event.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So the beauty of the bike is, okay, you've just got a ton of power. And so that is easily translated. So now we've got all this power, which your power numbers are way up there. The only missing component is the skill. So we're talking about making sure you can ride your bike, and that's changing gears effectively to use that power, crazy. Taking corners, and not having to slow down for corners. That's the only missing component there. The swim, you still have a big technical focus right now versus just swimming, just because you're so new to it. And that's just it's so technical driven that just takes time, and you're going to continue to be working on your form for years to come. I still work on my form. And
your form looks pretty good, by the way. I think you got it. You can stop now. So I can catch up.
You'd probably be, Anyway, you need fitness to hold form.
Sure.
I'm so unfit in the water that I might beat you in 100, and then you'll probably catch up to me because my fitness is gone. And then the run, like, you can't force it because of the pounding on your body. Like, you have to be methodical about the load to not hurt yourself.
And talk about the different terrains too as well, because we were talking about that yesterday, because now I was like running on the sidewalk. I didn't know asphalt was a little bit more cushiony. Like, it has better give. I'm talking directly to my best friend back there because he thinks he can run. And he's running in Vivos. He's running in Vivos, guys. That's a little crazy. But so talk a little bit about that.
So we talked about, what is the impact that you're putting into your body and joints. So when you're landing, you're basically taking 3 times your body weight into every single step. If you're someone like yourself that are already struggling with a knee issue, I mean, that's a lot of pounding on your joints. And I tell athletes, what slows you down from progression? It's not the body's ability to build like cardiovascular fitness or aerobic capabilities. It's
Yeah.
actually your lower leg cannot keep up with how fast you're wanting to run. Like
Yeah.
the ligaments and the tendons, all of that needs to be built up over time. So let's choose a softer surface to kind of ease ourselves into it. And so on the scale of softer surfaces, so that you can run without pain, and be easier on your joints to then catch up, and through running frequency on these surfaces, that is how you injury proof your body.
Sure.
I have to say that 10 times over. People think I'm hurt, I can only run every third day. Well, that's the worst thing you can do. I'd rather you run every day and build up that tolerance to the pounding, build up your efficiency to take it for 10 minutes rather than every 4 days where it's just your body doesn't learn how to absorb that pounding through your stroke. So treadmill, grass, track, then trail, then asphalt, then concrete. Do not run on concrete. It's so hard on your joints.
Yeah, this is what I was doing. That's what I was doing with this ACL. Tell them about like, what was it when you ran consistently? When you started and then kind of increased it from there, because you told me about that yesterday. I was
just about my numbers. Yeah. So it was a fun experiment. I'd actually just gotten into Maffetone training, and
explain to them what Maffetone training is first.
Yeah. So Maffetone is a simple formula that you don't have to have data on you, but you need a chest strap. First of all, your heart rate monitor in your watch does not work. It always reads high. You need a chest strap to connect to your watch to get a right heart rate training. And it's basically, he figured out a formula to really increase your aerobic capabilities by 180 minus your age. And for most people, that's where we start. That's the Maffetone formula to say, stay underneath that heart rate when you do all your aerobic training. And that heart rate number is essentially keeps you slow enough so that you can build upon all the sessions without having hormonal stress, adrenal stress. That's a big thing because I've gone through that before to me. And so it's like, how can I do all this training without being completely wiped out every single time I train? And then also when you do go slower, it's less stress on your joints. And so when I had my child, I have a 4-year-old, almost 5-year-old, gained a lot of weight. And so I was like, hey, I need to start back really slow. I'm going to try Maffetone training. And so at the time it was like, I have to keep my heart rate under 140 or 142 at the time for all my runs. And so every time I ran, I stayed within that 10-beat window, be it like 132 to 142. I started and I was running like a 9:30 pace. And each day, which was exciting, I would go out and run, and I would do it on the treadmill because it was softer for me when I was weighing heavier. And what's fun about it is I could look at my heart rate and then up my pace based on, it's a much easier way to control your heart rate, where you slowly build and then up your pace based on what your heart rate is doing. Within 3 months, I'd got that down to like a 6:45 pace at that exact same heart rate, which was insane. But I was running like every day, very slowly. I never ever did any interval work. It just shows you, Mark Allen writes about this. Mark Allen is one of the goats in triathlon. That was his breakthrough moment when he won Kona, was him adopting this Maffetone method. And when he started, he's a world champion. He was running like an 8:30-minute mile Maffetone, and he got down to running a 5:30 pace Maffetone, and that translates to your Ironman capability.
So the distances that you were running each and every day, it varied obviously, right? I found that even a 2-mile run here and there made a massive difference. And so there were weeks, I think I was running, I told you most of my training years I was running 7-8 times a week, but it was maybe 15 minutes off the bike here, 30-minute easy run in the evening. You know, I got to running 10 times a week because I feel like the frequency, you just build that efficiency, that heart rate just starts to come down real quick, and then having small little doses didn't really affect me. Like I could do it and I wasn't tired after that, which allowed me to do it again. You know, so. So I give that a lot to my MMA guys for their off stuff. Like, so whatever off day that they have, or like a recovery day, I'll give them Maffetone running. And we've seen for that, it kind of builds their aerobic capacity, right? It builds their output. And I've seen tremendous increases in their ability to keep going and repeat bouts of energy because they have the ATP, they have all that oxygen being delivered. So I definitely agree with that. It sucks because like when I first started, it was like a 12-minute mile. Not gonna lie, I'm gonna put myself in that position. I had to stop and walk and shit. My wife was running past me, which sucked because I always beat her in everything, but she beat me in this. But now, you know, I'm flowing. Like I think I can hold like it was a 9 or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's a big increase. I was 210 pounds. Now I'm like sitting around 200 pounds. But you can see exactly, okay, you are getting better at running slower, which again is going to carry over. Absolutely. Because it's sustainable.
Yeah.
So that's cool. But then, all right, so now as far as we talked about, like, it's an endurance sport, but you always tell me too, it's strength driven, right? So how important is strength training for the triathlete?
So we always tell a person it's if you can slow down the least, that's the person that's going to win the race.
Yeah.
And typically you have to look at what is happening at the end of the race. So your form is breaking down.
Sure.
Your form is breaking down because that's a strength limiter. I mean, I can't tell you enough. And that's the same on the bike. It's like when someone's going by you, it's not because they have this bigger aerobic engine. Like you guys are all aerobic machines because you're swimming, you're biking, you're running 20, 25 hours a week. It's that strength limiter that is slowing you down. They're able to sustain this output for 4 or 5 hours in a bigger gear. What's happening is your legs are fatiguing. You don't want your legs to be a limiter. You know, you don't want your form to be a limiter. And so getting in the gym just to increase your strength is massive to keep form together, obviously to decrease like the probability of injury. I mean, that's important because a lot of people are hurting themselves through this process as well. But
yeah, I feel like because of my background in strength training, like I know even when I'm exhausted, like yesterday I ran 8.5, but like at the end of the 8.5, even though like I was physically tired everywhere, I was able to still keep my form and like my technique and like still keep everything structured. Whereas like, all right, and I focus on that too. I'm like, all right, just don't look like shit. As long as that works and we're good. But that's because like my hips, my adductors, my quads, my glutes, my hamstrings, all that are in my core rotation. Everything's kind of centered because of strength training. Yeah. So you guys that are doing endurance sports, make sure that you do some strength training.
Yeah.
Right.
It's an absolute game changer. I mean, I didn't focus on strength for the longest time, and I would just feel like things shutting off mid-race, and then things hurting. So it's like if my hip flexors all of a sudden not working, well, the strain on my lower back, and I'll get off the bike and my back hurts. Well, you're not going to race to your capability. Yeah. Whereas like you were feeling as far as just being structurally sound and strong, like I felt that carried me through all my best races where nothing hurt. My body could perform as it had trained aerobically, just through that strength foundation. So.
How important, because I know we've talked about it, and I seen it on a video that you did when you did it was a half Ironman or the Ironman? Ironman, yeah. My bad. Do you like that? Full Ironman, by the way. You were talking about cadence, right? Yes. Can you explain like cadence and pacing and all that stuff too as well?
Yes. So cadence is so important, especially as a triathlete. So you have to look at the simple math of what is making you run faster. You have stride rate and stride length. And the combination of that is going to make you a faster runner, if we can get that up there. When you are running off the bike and your legs are just smoked, you are not running with a powerful stride, with a long stride. No. So the only thing that's going to keep you moving forwards and keep that pace up is stride rate. And that has to be your go-to, because as you get fatigued, I mean, you've been out there for 8 hours, you're just the only thing that's moving forward is you turning your legs over. Sure. And keeping that pace and not essentially slowing down. So, you know, I hear a lot of people like, well, my height, my weight, you know, I'm like, no, like we shoot for 180, but essentially you have the pros running 200, that's their strokes. Really? Yeah, their stride rate. Which is allowing them to run as fast as they are. So that is just a massive focus. It's just like how quickly can we get off our feet and turn it over. But I also find there's a direct correlation between their form as well, because the heavier you are in your stride, again, now you're just putting more force into the ground, you're sinking in, you're losing your posture, and the quicker and lighter we can be, you know, the better you're going to run. You're going to hold your posture together. So that's like paramount for all triathletes. As far as pacing is concerned, you have to pace yourself for that event, and it really scales based on how strong of an athlete you are and the distance, so the time you're going to be out there. Okay, and the percentage, we work off threshold percentages. So your threshold is what is your power you can hold for an hour, what is your heart rate you can hold for hours, your threshold heart rate, your threshold power, and then we scale it based off of that. And so the pros, for example, they can operate at around 80% of their threshold for 9 hours because they're going to be out there for a short amount of time and they're fitter. Whereas someone, an amateur, they're going to operate for an Ironman at 70%. And so that's why we always say that peak number, you know, we start there with the athlete. Let's bring that threshold up as high as possible, because you're always only going to operate at a percentage of that threshold. It's never going to be like, I'm going to race this Ironman at my threshold number. No, like you're limited by what that number is. Yeah. And for a lot, the peak power number limits their threshold, and that's why we focus on that first.
Sure. And training your threshold obviously is going to push the threshold higher.
Correct. There's so many different ways to train your threshold. That's the beauty of it, and all training trains your threshold. Yeah. But you have to figure out what does that specific athlete need. And what we found is a reverse periodized model works really well, because if you can create a ton of torque, a ton of force, so training like that peak power, now we say, hey, let's only hold a percentage of that but go longer. Let's hold the percentage, go longer. That is more effective for the most part than building them up from the bottom and asking them to go longer and then push more force. I would say that makes a lot of sense for endurance in general, because you're building up for more volume. Right.
Yeah, as opposed to a powerlifting sport where you're actually going to flip that on its side. Right. Or flip that upside down, actually. And you would work on your endurance and then work into your maximal peak power.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And that's the regular model where they used to say, hey, you're 12 months out from your race, let's build this massive base. And a lot of people, especially when they have jobs and wives and lives, they can't do that. Like, we have to be smart with your training. And if we're asking you to be able to ride 5 hours and run 3.5 hours at this date, well, let's work up to that with the distances, and be doing that the final 12 weeks, not 2 years out. Or, you know,
well, it's specificity too. You're building into specificity as opposed to starting out specific, because that's exactly where you're going to be at, and that you obviously run into overtraining very easy doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit to the business side of things. Right? So now you have a successful online training business, right? You have coaches that are under you, you work with Trainer Peaks, you have your business there. How did all that come about?
So really Nick Bear was the instigator on it. So before blowing up, I've been coaching people for as long as I've been racing. So I had Training Peaks, and then I also worked for a coaching company, worked at under someone else, and kind of learned their way of doing things until I stepped out on my own. I would say I stepped out on my own about 3 years ago to do my own programming through Training Peaks. Nice. And at the time I was racing full time. I just had a new daughter. I mean, she was 2 years old. So when I was racing pro, I was probably averaging around 25 hours a week of training, but then you have to add in the time to the pool and the recovery, and so you're looking at a full-time job. I mean, 35, 40 hours a week. And so I had probably 20 to 25 athletes. That was like the perfect amount for me to then do on the side.
These were all online, or this was in person too?
It was a mix, but most are online. Most are online. And then I had one of my athletes, he was like, I love this, please mentor me to help me coach others, because there's a whole bunch of people I'm seeing in person. They want me to help them, but I don't know how to do that. And so Coach Mike, I'll give him a shout out, he said, let's do this. And so he was kind of my first step of like, okay, let's add a coach and see what happens. And that kind of gave me the experience to know what could be done. So it was honestly a year ago, we looked at it, and a year ago today, I added him. I mean, he has about 30 athletes now, but we just added on a few athletes, and each week we would sit and say, okay, this person's training for this, what would you do with it? And so I was able to share and mentor him. Fast forward, starting with Nick, all of a sudden I was getting hit up by emails, and luckily I just created a website. I didn't even have a website until like November of last year. It was literally just word of mouth. Never marketed myself. I was doing just fine. And so I was like, okay, I have this website. I have all these. I can't coach all these people, so I'm gonna have to hire. And I have coached my coaches. One of them, I've coached him for 10 years, and we work together at the other coaching company, so I know how he works, and so that was an easy hire. I mean, we're the same person. Mike, he had been working with me. Coach Harold, he's been doing the sport longer than me. He probably honestly is more educated than I am on anything, so we kind of went together just to kind of elevate what we could offer to the athletes. He came in, and then 2 other pro triathletes that I'm coaching, I've been working with them. They understand how I work, and so it's just also an opportunity to mentor them through this process. brought them on online. So now the process is, if everyone reach out to the website and they want to work with one of our athletes, I always talk to them first and find out, you know, kind of what are they training for, what is their lifestyle like, and then based on our conversation, because I can't take on any more athletes, I pair them up with the right coach.
Yeah.
And how it works on Training Peaks is we are all on the same dashboard. And so I have a library of workouts. So it's all the same nomenclature, all the same progressions and periodizations we talked about. I've also created a whole bunch of like mock training plans for all the distances you can imagine, all the different phases we go through, be it like a neuromuscular phase, which I've termed it, or like a threshold build phase or a stamina phase. We just kind of give words. It's essentially get fast extend. Let's just break that down. Fast extend and race specific. So like all the race specific phases.
Sure.
And they're able to pull from that, and then they're able to customize it to the athlete, because what we talked about is the key thing is how can we put swim, bike, run, strength into your weekly schedule and make it sustainable where it becomes a habit of your daily life. You don't even have to think about what you have to do that day. And so the coaches work closely with those athletes to do that, and then give them feedback and all the nutrition, recovery support, the gear support. There's just a lot of kind of relationship happening after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's super easy to follow as an athlete, which is good. That's why I was like, you know what, this is something we need to talk about, because we have a lot of coaches that listen. Where's the website that they can go to though first to sign up?
Yeah, so nvdmcoaching.com is my website.
And that's, tell me your whole name, by the way. Natasha
Van Der Merwe is how you say it in, I'm South African, so, and it's an Afrikaans, it's the most common Afrikaans name. And then it's like Smith, there were jokes about us. Van Der Merwe walked into a bar. And here in America, we just say Van Der Merwe.
Wow.
Just to make it a little easier.
Yeah, I was saying it wrong too, by the way. So there it is. But all right, so then you have that now. What's next? What do you feel like is going to be the next progression for your coaching and maybe for your trainer? Are you going to go ahead and do another event or what? Get into it?
I'm so passionate about helping others right now. Like I definitely would talk about faith, but I feel like God is calling me to use the knowledge that I've gotten, you know, over the last 12 years through my experience to be able to share and help others. And so my heart is so deep in that. However, when I trained with you the other day, and I mean, I've never seen my heart rate that high. I almost threw up.
Really?
I was like,
Oh man.
I was so
that's all we were doing. Hey, listen, all she did was bell squat marching. Let me just tell you that. And the reverse hyper.
It was when I was the reverse hyper. Because you're on your stomach, and then I ate chicken.
that does it. But
that was hard, like me pushing. I haven't honestly pushed to that level like this year at all.
Really?
Yeah, it's just because I've been so focused and the energy it takes to do that. But it made me feel like, okay, I got to figure this out, because I do love it. And I always told athletes over the last like 12 years, everything I learn, I like to go through what the athletes are doing. And so like any workout they've ever done, I've done it not only to understand like the physical demand, but also like the emotional demand, like how am I recovering from it. And I honestly put that a lot into how I scale my workouts for my athletes too, and take all that into account. Like what can they like emotionally handle and recover from. So maybe if I can figure it out, but my heart is in coaching right now. I have a bigger impact there. I'm twofold. Number one, I'm just like, honestly, my life has changed and gone in so many directions over the last decade that I honestly just show up to do whatever like God has placed in front of me for that day. And I understand like if I follow that path, like those things will take care of itself.
Absolutely.
However, we're so big right now. You want a level of planning to say, well, what can we do with this? How can we impact more people? So the next step is I'm starting like a mentorship program just for coaches to come up, learn like how we coach athletes, and then hopefully bring them in as coaches under NVDM coaching, and then help more athletes, because a lot of my coaches are almost capacity right now as well. So like the next step is bringing more in.
How many coaches do you have?
6.
Okay.
6 coaches, and each of them have a different capacity, you know, with how much they're communicating with athletes and how much they can handle in their personal life. But there are things like training camps. I mean, we can have just people just doing training camps. There's a definite need for that, where people we're doing one for Ironman Texas most likely in September, where people will come out and they'll get to experience the entire course prior to race day, and we give
Yeah.
them the tips on pacing and nutrition, and they get to ride on the course and understand it, so that come race day, it's they know what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So
That's cool though, because you know that's you're not only helping the athlete, you're helping the coach, and then from there, those coaches are helping those athletes. So you're helping a wide range. It's the same thing that I do with my mentorship program, but
Yeah.
that's great. You know, you can hit it from all angles, which is important.
Yeah.
All right, well, give them your Instagram,
Okay.
and also, why don't you just start a YouTube channel? Why don't we do that? Between me and Nick, like, giving you the blueprint here, let's go.
I know. So yeah, that's the next step, because what's funny you said that is I always go to look for videos to send to athletes, but they never say things the way I want it said, or
course.
it takes 5 minutes to get like a small piece of information,
I
like
know
you
it.
know.
Yeah.
So I actually want to start a YouTube channel where it's like 30-second videos.
Sure.
It's like we're just talking about one arm swim, and
Yeah.
we're going to demonstrate it and explain it, and then you move on to the next video. So you keep me on that, because I know
will.
I need to do that.
I will. You would be really good at tutorial videos. You know what I mean? Like how we did it yesterday
Yeah.
with the whiteboard, and then going over just technique, you know, and you'd be surprised how many people would sign up and subscribe to that.
Okay.
For sure. It's not like you have to be like Nick and do a vlog or anything
Yeah.
like that. We're coaches, so at that point, it's like it's better to kind of transition over to being more educational.
Yeah.
And even also you can show how you're training with those individuals, like how we have coaching videos too as well.
Yeah.
I'll send you over another good friend of mine, Chris Barnard, who has OTA, Overtime Athletes,
Yeah.
and he does the same thing. He has his tutorial videos, and he also shows, you know, his coaching. So that's kind of our style, right? But yeah, so
Teach
again,
me.
I got you. But yeah, go ahead and
Yeah.
let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm Natasha VDM81, and the year I was born, 81, and then NVDM Coaching, and then my website is nvdmcoaching.com.
.com. All right, guys, there you have it. Make sure you follow, subscribe when she has a channel, and I'll see you again next time.